Hello, and welcome back to An Idea Way. I'm Hayden. Today's episode is a little different from some of the other episodes I've done. Usually, I'm taking an idea from a philosopher, a writer, a scientist, or some thinker, and trying to pull it into real life. But today, I get to have a conversation with someone who's actually had to live a lot of these ideas in real time. I'm joined today by Howard Bubb, who has spent decades leading companies, building businesses, going through turnarounds, working with boards, mentoring executives, and making decisions where the stakes are real. He's been a CEO, a corporate executive, a board member, and a leader in moments where strategy, people, pressure, judgment are all big factors. But this episode isn't just going to be a conversation about a resume. I don't want this to just be what jobs did you have or what happened next. What I'm really interested in is the thinking underneath it all. How did you make hard decisions? How do you lead people through uncertainty? How do you know when to push, when to listen, when to change course, when to stay patient? So, the goal today is to pull out the ideas behind the experience, the lessons that don't just apply to CEOs or executives, but to anyone trying to lead, to build something. Howard, thank you for being here. I'm really excited for this conversation.
So am I, Hayden. It's good to be here.
All right. To open, when people read your resume, they see CEO, Intel, startups, boards, turnarounds, and executive leadership. But before all of that, who were you? What kind of person were you when you were young?
I think I was a person, Hayden, who really enjoyed solving different problems. If I put it in a word, it was curious. My mom grew up on a farm and she believed you should be able to do things by yourself, and she would send me out at a young age to get things done. And I think I just kept doing it.
Yeah, that's great. What parts of that person, like who you were as a kid, still show up in your leadership today?
I think the ability to take a problem apart. Again, when you're young and the task might be to repair something that's broken that you've been handed, you have to take it apart in your mind first. You have to figure out what tools you have. You have to figure out any number of things, what your budget is. And that's the same, of course, with teams of people rather than yourself. That's the complexity that I think is the most difficult, is how to really deal with a team of people. The problems just get bigger.
Right, right, of course. It almost sounds to me like you, at a young age at least, were very independent with your problem solving. Did you always imagine yourself going towards a job where you would lead people, or was that always your tendency?
No, it wasn't actually. In fact, I recall distinctly when I was younger that I liked math and science because you could figure out the answer. And I did not have a love for English because it was graded subjectively. And I considered the people element to be wild, untamable. And I gravitated into things like physics and math initially for that reason exactly.
Yeah, I feel that personally as well, and I think a lot of viewers would relate to that. What, as a child, what were you not good at yet that you are good at now?
I think the idea of leadership is something I had to learn. But along the way, as I faced bigger and bigger problems, I realized that I couldn't do them on my own. And out
Hmm.
of the necessity to do the thing I love, which was solve complex problems, I had to learn how to manage and then eventually to lead. And those are two very different things.
Hmm. That's very interesting. What what did you think leadership was before you actually started leading?
Well, if you don't mind, I think I'll turn the question around to what is management. And I sort of had an
Sure,
idea what
sure.
management was, is pulling together and managing a team of like-skilled, like-minded people. And in my early career, those were people who did software, hardware, managed projects, if you will. And we all had a lot in common. So managing them was a lot about getting them in a room, sharing all your best ideas, and then you could go off and implement them. Um, that was familiar, even from high school, I'd say, because I was on sports teams. And again, people are like-minded. They know the plays, they know the calls. You can get together, you share goals just automatically from the top down. By that, I mean goals. What is it you want to achieve? The how do you want to do it? and then what you're going to do to go do it, all naturally align. But you get into a more advanced environment, be it college or certainly in the workplace. And even though you're managing a team, they come from different backgrounds, different, uh, less subtle versions of their training, and different even ethnic and other diverse perspectives. And so all of a sudden, when you say, let's do this, the the commonality isn't there. And that's when you begin to run into leadership. So I would say management is the process of helping a group of people perform together who have a lot in common. They're a team of sorts already. Leading
Sure.
has to do with getting them aligned in the more subtle things, like where do you want to go? What do you want to stand for? What makes us and that individual really unique? And therefore, what can we all get behind? And so there is a crossover between managing and then leadership, but in a full-on leadership mode, to get back to your question, leadership is one person said it's the process of managing from a distance, meaning you have minimal interaction and initially maybe very minimal things in common, and you need to work on primary motivation and directional alignment.
Right, right. Would you mentioned earlier in your response about the differences between people in ethnicity and goals and how they see their relationship with the company. Would you mind giving the example of how those differences in, I guess, at their core ideologies affect how people work in your experience?
Yeah. First of all, I'll say that I think it is well proven that diverse teams make better decisions because everybody bringing that perspective is analyzing the problem from a different point of view. And some of the biggest disasters in engineering or business are because all those points of view were not considered. They either followed the manager into where they were going, or they followed the pre-existing ideas into where they were going, and they didn't have the diversity. How they're different? They're different in funny ways. In Japan, if you're in Japan in particular, where it's native there, you're in a meeting and they go, yes, yes, yes. And people literally walk out of the meeting going, fantastic, they got it, they loved it. And then you realize that in Japan, yes is a very polite way of saying, I'm listening. Yes, I hear you. And so just that, difference starts to reorient you into really thinking more deeply. Are people understanding what I'm saying? I mean, I'm putting something out there, but the responsibility of a good leader is to not just say what you mean, but to say it in a way that people hear what you need them to hear. And that, of course, is even more challenging when you look across, racial, gender, and other differences. I mean, engineers think problem out. I'll solve the problem, and then people will buy it. People with more of a marketing and extroverted and people-oriented think about the customer first and what is it they feel they need. And you have to bring all those perspectives together to lead an effective team.
Right. I think perspective is a huge inflection point in leadership. I feel like a lot of people, when they start thinking about leadership, they think it's about having some sort of answer. But it sounds like to me in my research and in what you're saying right now that you learned early in your career that it's more complicated than that. I want to bring into this your idea of bring the team along, which is an idea I saw in an article about you that was published by Exco. Um, that idea of bring the team along, I saw connected to your leadership philosophy in that solving a problem yourself might feel faster, but like that solution doesn't work if the team that you're working in doesn't own the solution. How did you learn that idea?
I think that was a painful lesson. That's part of the journey from manager to leader, as I took it for granted, having dealt with smart, like-minded people, that we would naturally share it, what we wanted to do. And I had some big failures because we would be months down the road. And as we got more into it, it was very clear that people felt differently about the gap in our direction. I had a good mentor back then. Couple things I learned is one is that the shortest distance between 2 points is rarely a straight line. He was getting me to think about the fact that I see an answer, my answer, not the answer,
Right.
um, is actually disabling to a team. And you have to take the time to get all of their inputs to have a better answer, first of all, but then to enlist the entire group in it. Something else he said is decisions are a lot easier to make on your own. They're impossible to implement that way. So hard lessons, though. Having been schooled in engineering, math, physics, whatever, I thought in terms of the answer, but most worthwhile things are not absolute answers. They're the answer in the mind of the customer, of the user, and the myriad number of ways they think about it. And that's frustrating, but it's also a much more fun and rich and involving kind of problem to solve.
Right. Have you ever had like a technically correct decision or a decision that you thought was completely correct fail because people on your team were not brought in?
Um, yes, absolutely. And it's not because they weren't brought in, but they weren't brought in fully. And by that, I mean, some people think, okay, what does everybody think about that? Great, off we go. And they weren't really enlisted. I mean, some people who are introverted like to think about things. They literally cannot process it, or they don't choose to. They want to think about it deeper before they render an answer.
Hmm.
So a false leader who says everyone's happy and they're doing everything that I think of, might rush it because that favors their way of thinking and not bringing them along. Uh, there's incorporating. A lot of people are quiet or they'll make a comment once, and this is back to cultural issues. There are certain cultures that don't disagree easily. They don't take the risk to speak up easily, and they need to be brought into an area of safety where you can. I found it helpful to say two things. One is you're our expert in this part of the user experience or in this technology. And as such, we really need your opinion. And when they hesitate, I say, well, let me be more clear than that. It is in your job description. It is a job function that you do this. And I like the sports analogy of it's your ball. It's your ball. It's yours to take. Take it. And I think when people are invited in repeatedly and they can see it's safe, they can see the inputs taken, they can see that people want them to be in the game, then ultimately they engage. But if you don't get your team to engage, then you don't get active buy-in to whatever it is the team is doing.
Yeah, I think that's an idea we sort of, or I guess I have sort of gone over a few times in this podcast that um, as a leader, it's your job to create a space where everyone, even people who are introverted and need to take time to think about it, can budge in and say what they need to say because sometimes they have the best opinion in that given case. But I think the manner of implementing it is hard because in some of these decisions you need to make decisions fast. And I feel like the way that it's often described, bringing everyone in can make things almost slow. How do you personally bring people into the question without making everything slow?
I think that's a fun part of something that I've learned over the years is having a healthy decision process. And actually, those things that have to be fast or slow or whatever, what they all have in common is the idea of a successful solution. And if you can get the team to start there and say, hey, here's the kind of problem we have. And in some cases, hey, we don't really have to solve this for 6 months. It's on the back burner. Why don't a few of you do offline research in these areas? And then we'll come back together and, you know, bring our thinking to the table and on we go. But quite often it's the case that here's a problem. By the way, because of some particular issue that's occurred out in the field with a current product, or maybe it's a government or regulatory constraint, This problem has to be solved by Friday, which means we need to come together on a solution this afternoon because it'll take us 3 days to implement it. And everyone has to internalize those are real external forces. The world is not ideal, but it is fair in the sense that anyone in that situation has the same parameters. So it's all about when you define the problem, making sure you include time as a factor, which, by the way, bears on this issue of perfectionism or, what is a good answer? Well, a good answer is one that achieves the overall problem statement, and that might have some functional characteristics, but it also has time, budget, and quality. And there are myriad stories. One that was very famous is a famous company called Broadcom. They're still around after a lot of acquisitions, but they came out with the first cable modem. The modem that's in if you have a broadband cable going to your house and you're getting 100, megabits or a gigabit of data, there's a cable modem in that box. And when those standards were created, they were very complicated. Hence, these boxes were very expensive and very few people could afford them. But Broadcom brought it out in a chip. The chip worked, but to the specification, it was fundamentally defective. And the engineers wanted to fall back and redesign it and make it better and get it right. The person running the company at the time, who went on to be a successful entrepreneur, said, wait a second, let's go to the standards body. No one else has anything, and it's over a year away. And I bet you all the cable companies will change the specification to match what we have because, in fact, price and time to market were more important than the quality, that is the accuracy of the solution. So all these are variables that you get to manage. It makes for a more interesting problem, even though it's frustrating at times.
Right. So why do you think some leaders, or I guess managers, as you would put them, skip that step of defining their variables and adding that extra time that they need to solve the problem to like the fullest extent that would make their job much easier?
I think it's a pretty fundamental flaw. In Silicon Valley, there's the story of Hewlett Packard gold plating. And in the early days of Hewlett Packard, when they were the most famous instrument company in the world, they made the first handheld calculators. But literally everything they did, the circuit board, if you opened it up, was gold plated because it never corroded. It was impervious to rust or water. I mean, the things just ran forever. It cost money, but who cared? It was Hewlett Packard. And they had to realize eventually that while that is the ultimate in quality, and the mission of Hewlett Packard was quality, price matters. Um, things are going to wear out. They have a natural life in the case of electronics of 2 or 3 years. So gold plating serves no purpose whatsoever, and on you go. So I just think it's normal for people to not consider budget, time to market, life cycle of the product, so many other things they're very tangible if you stop to think about them, but they're not natural.
Right. That almost makes me think of the idea behind Starbucks and Howard Schultz in the sense that some leaders, or I guess managers again, as you would put them, um, prioritize things like company growth, or like Starbucks did prioritize more locations while forgetting their true identity as in I don't recall the name. Sorry, you were talking about the gold-plated calculators.
Mhm,
They forgot that their true purpose was to make calculators, and Starbucks at that time forgot that their true purpose was to make a coffee shop environment.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I wouldn't say that's managers versus leaders, not to disagree with your question. I
Sure.
think this happens at all levels of a company. It happens in the boardroom when you have two people or a group of people all arguing about the right direction.
Hmm.
I find more times than not, they've gotten 3 or 4 steps ahead of themselves. You have to back up and say, what problem are you trying to solve? And per your Starbucks example, we need to get more restaurants open. Okay, what problem are you trying to solve? Well, our quality, coffee quality. And eventually, Howard Schultz, he's trying to make the third place where people want to be
Right.
instead of any other coffee shop. And depending on how you frame the problem, of course, you get very different answers. And hence back to your other question, which was excellent. around this idea of people not considering all the variables in the problem definition
Hmm.
and getting that in common before you rush in to solve it. So step
So,
one in problem solving is agree on the problem.
sure, yeah. What does it look like in that scenario where you understand the problem and the team itself actually owns the problem?
Oh, it's fantastic when you say you understand that. I take it you collectively, because I
Sure.
wouldn't say that I've um, the world's getting complicated and it seems more complicated every year. I think it is, and it's moving quicker. So before certain companies, um, I don't want to mention a particular company, but they would call it, well, I'll say it, Intel had something they famously called the Andy Grove playbook. And
Sure.
Andy Grove never failed. I mean, his playbook worked for probably 30 years. And the people who worked there, and in fact were somewhat born into Intel, it was their first job, talked about the Andy Grove playbook. And I think that it's important to get out in the world and maybe fail or stub your toe and realize there are different playbooks that work at different points in time in a company. And you have to question the foundation of those playbooks. Your previous podcasts have pointed out many of those cases.
Right. Right. On that note of high pressure situations versus like, as you said, going out there and stubbing your toe, perhaps in a low pressure situation. When you're in a high pressure situation and there's no perfect answer, like you can't afford to stub your toe and make a mistake. How do you actually make a decision?
Well, first, I think you have to realize that you are going to make mistakes. And if anyone believes that by thinking about it a little longer, they're not going to make a mistake or they'll drastically reduce it, they need to, think long and hard about, it's the 90% solutions that almost always win, meaning you solve it 90%, maybe even 80%, but you
Hmm.
get to market. If you're not in the game, you're not going to learn to play it. Think of all of that thought time as sitting on the sidelines watching training videos and working on your backswing or your lacrosse. There you go, thinking about how you're
Sure.
going to throw a lacrosse ball. You know all about that.
Yep.
But eventually you have to get on the field and play. So get an 80, 90% solution. Of course, it depends on the business. If you're talking, manned space flight, okay, get to 99.9 before you do it. But
Sure.
even there, you can launch empty rockets. You can SpaceX. I don't know how many they put up that crashed and burned before they could land it on its feet, but they didn't sit there thinking about it. They got out there and got in the game. So I think if you accept that, you're more likely to say, okay, this is complicated. There's a lot of trade-offs. Which ones are mandatory? Which ones are secondary? And you can jump in and start to innovate and figure it out.
Yeah, 100%. That sounds great. Um, a lot of these old Stoic philosophers that have gone over, like Socrates or Archimedes, they talk about this idea of disguising worrying or disguising thought that's unproductive as productive thought. And I think this connects very directly to what we're talking about here with people overthinking, trying to make the perfect decision. How do you separate fearing something like not going out into the field, as you're saying, to not playing the game, um, from useful caution, like caution that you should respect,
I think that's a lesson that we all learn to varying degrees throughout our life. Little kids aren't afraid of falling over. They
right?
somehow intuitively know that if I'm going to learn to walk, I'm going to fall on my face a lot. I don't know where it is we get afraid of failing exactly, but I think that's why kids are wonderful is they get up and they sing. And they don't care how they sing, but man, they're singing and learning how to sing.
Hmm.
Somewhere along the way, it's good that we have self-awareness, but we think that we should be better than anyone maybe rationally would be. So, um, I don't, I would like to think about where do we unlearn it as opposed to where we learn it. Um, One place I know I learned it is I have trouble writing things. It's very intimidating to me to put my thoughts in writing because they look so final. But I did learn if I can do a draft real quick, then I can begin to improve it. Then it's
Sure.
down, you can do a second draft. So, accept the flaws in what you do and if 1.0 is a first usable release, it's a minimally viable product at 1.0, then get your .5 release out quick. And your .6, .7, learn, introduce it, put it in the hands of people who look at it and say, hey, this is good enough, but I really would like to see this and this. And the sooner you get into it, the sooner you'll get to your 1.0 minimally viable product, and then you'll stay ahead. I mean, I would just encourage people, enter the game, be agile, and stay ahead. If you're not in the game, you're just never going to be ahead.
Yeah, 100%. You're talking a lot here about just trying to enter the game, but I understand that entering the game can sometimes be the wrong decision as well. Like it can be detrimental if you don't have the right stuff. What information, I guess, especially pertaining to business, because it's hard to answer this from a scope of everything. What information do you need before you move? What's absolutely necessary?
Well, I guess I think there are a myriad set of examples, and as you said, it's impossible to answer
Right.
in any all-inclusive way. But I'll give you two. I think there are businesses, and businesses by their nature sell a product,
Sure.
so they have to understand the customer and serve them in a way that they want to buy the product. There are products that improve linearly, that is, they incrementally get better each year. And those areas, in some sense, are easier to enter because if they're slow moving, you can figure out where they are. You can get a step ahead. You can make a lower cost car, as many of the low cost imports did, because I'm not going to do what the US is doing in building these very big, expensive cars because they don't fit on container ships and they've saturated that market. So you pick a niche and you get in there, and in that niche, you do better, incrementally better. And
Sure.
I think that just takes research. It takes hard work. It takes the willingness to interview the customers and see what they think about it, not what you think from your perspective. That takes you back to teams who have the ability to do that. The other, though, is the breakthrough innovation, the disruptive innovation, as people love to call it in the tech world. But there, it means thinking about someone's problem in a way that nobody is. And I really love the definition that one of Clayton Christensen's later books came up with.
Hmm.
But actually, I don't think it's in the book. It was in a presentation. But a disruptive solution is one that in the prior context would have been inadequate.
Hmm.
And the iPhone itself is one of the best examples. It was a bad notepad. It was a bad cell phone. The battery life was terrible. You couldn't see it in the daylight. You couldn't type on it really fast. By any conventional definition, it was a bad cell phone. But what you could do is you could load apps and make it yours. And in that sense, it was a breakthrough and it defined a new category. And here we are.
Sure. Sure.
So I think that's the idea of thinking through products is, are they incremental or are they going to be disruptive, and then address the market accordingly.
That kind of makes me think of the sort of turnaround situations that you've been in throughout your business career, and that like finding that niche could be a method to mend a broken or struggling organization in the sense that they need to find somewhere to pivot to grow. When you have in the past walked into these struggling organizations that you've helped turn around, what do you look for first?
Well, there's a before I join and after I join. The
Sure,
first
right.
thing I look for before I join is the market they're in and the basic quality. Is the market a good market? Is it growing? Is it innovating? If it's not changing, if it's static, then it's very hard to enter a static market. It's why restaurants are so they fail so much. It's hard to enter it. How do I really, really,
Hmm.
really? But in the world of technology we're talking about, it's about the market they're in and the quality of the people. There are many companies with super high quality people. Um, I would argue they didn't have the right strategy, maybe not the right leadership, and they couldn't really bring their talents to bear. But if those things are in place, market and people, then post entering, it's about sitting down with them and understanding what they see as the unique capabilities of their company. How do they want to define the company? And then bringing everyone together. And by everyone, I mean the employees, but also the investors. They
Right.
have to see the opportunity in pursuing the market that's being outlined. There have to be lead customers who value what it is you're talking about bringing to market. But it starts with the people themselves believing in what they're doing. And
Hmm.
if you can align all those elements, starting with people, investors, and then customers, um, and the customers are always on our mind, but the people have to be there first, then you can do great things. Great things.
Yeah, yeah. Something that I was super interested in when I was looking at, and again, talking to you, you brought up a couple more ideas that I didn't even think about when I was um, researching. And that, how do you know when you enter a company whether the issue is the strategy, the people, the culture, the execution of their product, the timing that they're doing? And you brought up more, even more like investors and like clients. How do you know what the issue is within the company when you enter?
Well, I'll say that in any company, including ones that I've run for years, so I'm not immune to it, all of those things are issues. And things are changing so quickly where you had a net promoter score, people were rating you, 9, 10, whatever. There was a slight turn in the market, and all of a sudden you drop 2 points.
Sure.
So all of these things need to be constantly watched. I will say, though, not to avoid your question, if you have people who are good, and by that I mean they're smarter than you are, smarter than I am. Frankly, if there's anyone on my team at the staff level isn't smarter than I am in the discipline they're in, then there's a big problem. I mean, finance is a huge field, marketing is a huge field, understanding users, software, hardware, silicon, on and on you go, the manufacturing operation.
Yeah.
People need to be deeply expert in all of those things. And I'm thinking of a company that I was working with recently, and the leader of that company felt he had to constantly be pushing his team.
Hmm.
And after a few times, like, why? Do they not agree with you on where you're going? You have a directional problem, which is part of strategy. Do they not agree on how you're getting there? Again, another problem. Do they just think you're going to do their job for them? They'll ask you questions, and you have. I mean, this is a broken company in
Hmm.
strategy, people, leadership, etc. And that is more common than one might want to think. Um, and so you have to look at all those things, and to a greater or lesser degree, they're all going to need work. But it starts with the North Star of where do we want to go together? Are we committed to that? And are we more committed to that than we are to the person in the cube next to us? That is to say, if we agree this is what we're going to do to revolutionize or grow or generate value for our community and business, then maybe we need to upgrade a couple of people on the team. And that's not negative, but we do need to develop an excellent team who's committed to that goal and all the other things. We need to sit down with customers and see how we can serve them in ways that they haven't thought of. Nobody asked for an iPhone,
Right. Right.
but when they saw it and began to use it, people said, "Oh, that's what I want."
Hmm.
And so you got to get out in front of your customers sometimes. And if it's a linear business, then you're not that far in front of them, and
Hmm.
you're focusing on operational efficiency, price, margins, other things.
You talked about upgrading the team and upgrading the people in your company. How do you tell those people and their coworkers the truth about what you're going to have to do to turn around a company without crushing company morale?
One of the things I'm really pleased about in after I'd done a few turnarounds and had a chance to lead companies is I got an experience where we turned over the senior management team twice in about a period of 7 years.
Hmm.
And I think only no one really quit on the job. Like, I'm out of here, I won't do it. After a while, one of the key people decided to go do something else. And the essence of it is we sat down together in a room, with no signs of status or anything else.
Hmm.
And we talked about what was working and what wasn't working. What did they perceive the goals to be, and what did the other person perceive? We got aligned. Bottom line, we got aligned on what we needed to achieve, where our competition was, and what it would take to get there. And after we did that, and I'm compressing a lot of time,
Of
but it
course. Yeah.
wasn't hard to go to, and people loved it. They loved being at that company. In fact, they called it their safe space because they knew what the rules would be. There would be rational reaction. If someone found a
Hmm.
problem, as long as they learned from it, well, they learned a lesson, and that's great. On we go. That's a win. But when someone faced the issue of to get to the next stage now, we've got to go international. We've got to, cut our production costs by 30, 40%, and that's going to take a level of automation. And hey, you're great. There's a job for you here. That isn't your background, though. And we've all agreed this is what we need to do. These people, it wasn't easy, I'm sure, but they said, you know what? You're right. Let's bring in someone who can do that. The whole team will do better. And I'm on the boat with everyone. I'll do better. And I'll learn those skills, and then I'll rise in the company in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that if you're honest with them, you don't deceive them into thinking that they are a lesser person if they don't have some skill they never had a chance to develop. So you give them respect, and you give them a chance to contribute to their maximum ability. They'll surprise you every time and do something great.
That's great. Honestly, that's a great representation of this idea that I've seen again in another interview with you about being respectful about the past, honest about the present, and optimistic about the future. You're being respectful about mistakes, and seeing how you can grow from them. You're being honest about them as well, I guess, in the present, and then you're optimistic and giving people a chance to perform to their best ability in the future. Why do all three of those values matter, though?
I think that the vast majority, I mean, 90% plus of people that I've had a chance to get to know over my life, they are not bad people at all. They want to do good, they want to achieve, they want to support their family, their community, they want to be thought of in possible ways. They're coming into life with a best effort. And
Hmm.
I think if you can respect people for that, one of our greatest employees at one company I was at was the guy who ran the mailroom. And he literally internalized this idea that I can be the best at what I do. He decided to get the mail back when mail mattered, FedExes and things like that,
Sure,
to get the
sure.
mail to people's desks 2 hours earlier. And he figured out that we could get things turned around the same day. If they get it in their inbox by 9 or 10 a.m., then they can get it in their outbox by 4, and that's the same day turnaround. He literally the efficiency reduction in headcount, on time, lack of errors was phenomenal. So I say that back to the fact that everybody wants to bring their best, and if you give them a chance to do that, and you ask them the simplest question is, "What's your field?" Okay, what do you think constitutes best in class? What would you like to be able to do to feel the absolute best about what you're doing? What's inhibiting you from getting there? Now, show me what you're going to do to be there. And they can internalize the idea of their own success across the whole company. And everybody gets excited about being best in class, globally best in class in whatever function they're doing within their team.
Hmm. That's great. Yeah, I think especially as a leader, being able to reframe the question to being able to perform to the best of your ability is a great way to see it for everyone.
Yeah.
Um, Something I'd like to
And
bring up there on, sorry? Yes?
I was just going to say, you actually asked a more complicated question, and I'm sorry I didn't really answer it fully.
That's
I was
all
going
right.
to say that starting with respect is so important because if you really respect them, you'll listen to them. you'll support them, and you'll realize that in what they do, they know more than you do.
Yeah,
And if
yeah,
you can respect them, then you have a bond that lets you be honest about the present. You know, hey, this is great, but now this technology or this thing's entered it, and where we're at today is going to demand this much more of us. Is that something you want to learn? You want to go get another degree? Or is this where we bring somebody in and you job share it with them? What do we do about that? And that's the
yeah.
full art of
I
generous about the
understand.
past, honest about the present, and then optimistic together. Create a plan wherein you can both be optimistic about the future.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Um, on like optimism for the future and doing your best. Um, a lot of the time, even if you do your best at a leadership level, you can fail or be wrong.
Sure.
How has your relationship with being wrong, especially as a leader, changed over time?
I used to confuse solving the problem in front of me with success. And I think we're trained to do that, unfortunately, through school. If I solve all the problems and get a good SAT score, I'm successful. Um, I think that when you become especially a senior leader, you have to be very careful that you're never married to the problem with a small p and the solution with a small s, meaning the specific problem or solution. You have to have your eyes on the horizon. To your Howard Schultz thing, if it is going to be the third place and it's all about the experience, never ever lose sight of that.
Right.
And I think if you can maintain that, then you can go through a lot of ups and downs, and maintain.
Hmm.
I think that's the thing. And then you can fail. You can have failures where they brought in food, and as you pointed out, in the case of Starbucks, the food interfered with the smell of the coffee.
Yes, and it
Okay,
made the
big
business
mistake.
not work.
We did that for a couple of years. Let's fix that mistake. So things only upend if you let those mistakes compound and you lose sight of your North Star in your business.
Have you on that note of Howard Schultz, something really interesting that I think is super hard for leaders to actually do is to reverse decisions like very publicly like that. Like Howard Schultz, both in his upscaling situation where he was trying to build a bunch more locations, and then his food situation, he very publicly had to downsize Starbucks and remove a couple menu items off the menu. Have you ever had to reverse the decision publicly, and what did that teach you?
Yes, I can think of a couple. I guess one I'll mention is in the time I was at Intel, Intel was pivoting from computing into networking and
Mm,
communications.
right.
And they made a series of acquisitions that were good acquisitions in general. They were good companies, good people, etc. Um, what they made some mistakes, however. They moved quickly. They could not assimilate the companies as quickly as they acquired them, and they did not fundamentally, in some way, relate it to their core business. So these businesses were only loosely um, aligned. And
Sure.
I had the opportunity when I came into the company through an acquisition, I was given or offered the opportunity to sort this out. And it was very difficult. There were 20 acquisitions. After we got together and I dealt with all 20 companies that were around the globe, we determined that some number of them were very healthy, but they did not really align to where Intel was going. And
Hmm.
they could be sold off and they could have a better future. Yes, there's some uncertainty, but those companies, for the most part, did manage to spin back out and go forward. There was a smaller number that we were able to align into four core businesses that really could grow inside of Intel, and then others, frankly, that we had to integrate into something else and shut down. That was
Hmm.
very painful, very, very painful thing. But it took about 18 months overall to get that into place. And it was very successful. Those four businesses became the fastest growing businesses in the company for some several years to come, because they could synergize off of the huge scale that Intel brought to the area they were. Um, so I think what I'm saying there is you need to admit the mistakes. You need to figure out where you're going to go and you're going to set a new course, but you cannot get married to the past. Be honest about the past, separate the past, but then get honest about the problems of the future and navigate a new strategy forward.
Hmm. It sounds a lot to me about like a huge aspect of leadership is at its core humility. Do you think humility is something that leaders can develop through like not through experience, but through like consciously developing it, or does experience just kind of force humility onto you?
I think it's both. I think you are right. Humility is a critical ingredient. Jack Welch had a thing he called intellectual honesty,
Hmm.
seeing things as they are versus how you want them to be. And the greatest multi-billion-dollar disasters are from CEOs who are, pretty all-powerful in their company, and they fall in love with an idea and they cease seeing it as it is, and they see it how they want it to be. The guardrails against that are two. One, have a very strong team who is invited to disagree with you constantly, and in
Hmm.
fact, challenged. Hey, I want you to take the opposite point of view, and I want you to argue that opposite point of view. So if we did this, do a pre-mortem. If we do this, and in 5 years we die, hence the pre-mortem part of it,
Right.
what's the most likely thing to have killed us?
Hmm.
So have a good team that can cast doubt, do your analysis carefully, and then if things aren't working, call it as it is. Oh, and as a leader, don't become so personally invested that you shut out the people around you. I cannot disagree with how this is going because Howard's in love with it.
Right. Right. I, I mean, I agree with you, and I think it's important to separate a leader from a problem and a solution in that sense. But I also think that confidence in a solution is very important in business. It's hard to fully commit to and at that point to execute to its fullest extent a solution if you're not confident in it. But I think that overconfidence and arrogance is quite possibly the worst thing for a solution as well. How do you stay confident in a solution without becoming arrogant?
I think you have to ask yourself, again, if you let your people be open to disagreement, when
Right.
they bring something forward and say, I'm challenging this, the challenge they do carry is, okay, what has factually changed since we embarked on this? What did we get wrong now that we have a better view of it? So what has changed? What did we get wrong? And what's the appropriate response? You have to be committed to a direction. You have to, if you're going to cross the ocean, you better sail west and keep sailing. Because if you decide to go north a little bit and then south, and then, I mean, you're not going to get anywhere, and you're going to end up in the middle of the ocean on the
Right.
bottom. So you have to commit to a direction, but it isn't with your eyes closed. It's back to what we talked about earlier. Get in the game, but eyes wide open. Set a direction. Don't lock into the end point.
Hmm.
I'm sailing west. I'm moving towards this, but don't get married to one point.
So just sort of keep your rudder in the water.
Rudder in the water. Keep your direction. Be committed to your direction, but always be looking for the wind to change. Always looking for what's happening around you, and don't be confused or don't lose confidence. If it's not changing, then you're probably on the right course still.
Right. Right. On that sort of note of changing courses, what has a specific sorry, we had another cut there for a second. My question is, what did a specific failure teach you that success couldn't have?
Um, I do think failure is in many ways a better teacher than success. Being successful teaches you one way. This worked. And it's like the Andy Grove playbook. It worked and it was wonderful. It lasted for 30 years. But it doesn't mean it lasts forever or works in every case. I think failure, in my case, I'm thinking of a turnaround that I was
Sure.
involved, that I led, and I did not comprehend entirely the disagreement. There were three major locations the company operated in, and there were significant disagreements between those locations and some of the people involved, clearly, that I did not properly comprehend. And we began trying to ramp and move from early concept or MVP into the next phase, and the wheels sort of came off
Right.
because we did not have truly deep alignment across the people. And because of that, we had fracture lines among the investors. And I learned that you cannot skip those critical phases for a startup or for a turnaround of making sure people are really pulling all in the same direction before you step on the gas.
Right. I like that. Um, Sorry for a rough transition here, but for the sake of time, I want to move into a more um, or I guess just a different section of this podcast on mentors. Who changed the way that you thought about leadership?
I think it's different phases in someone's life. I rethought leadership a few times. My early leadership, when I was moving from being a individual contributor to a manager leader, that I needed to put more time into the team. That it wasn't a matter of just getting all the brain power that could solve a problem. It came down to getting the team wanting to solve the same problem and then properly working together. It is said the most important thing to a team is smooth interaction. They feel good with their team member, good process.
Sure.
And I initially said, literally said, we don't need no stinking process. We need to jump in and get it done. Um, no. So that was probably the mistake of thinking that everyone thought like me, projecting oneself,
Right.
and
Right.
that was a bit of an eye opener. Later on, it was the idea that as you move up into full general management of a bigger operation, that you have to let go of pretty much everything. You get to pick major things you want to drive. You get to move on inflection points, make sure the company catches the inflection point, but
Hmm.
then you have to stand back because you have too much to do. And if once you stick your hand in, you're slowing down a half a dozen other people
Right.
who probably do it quicker and better than you can.
Hmm.
Um, and I would say that's the last thing is I learned if you build a good team, and it is absolutely true that you are guaranteed to be the least educated or experienced person at the table in every discipline the table covers. If you run across somebody who says, hey, they're still the smartest guy in the room, or they ever were the smartest guy in the room, then you're coming across somebody who lacks a realistic sense of self-awareness,
Yeah. Of course.
and they
Of
will not
course.
succeed.
Hmm. Has there been a mentor who's told you something that you didn't understand until years later of experience?
Mm. There have been many of those. I'm pausing, not that it's hard to think of one.
You find a good one? Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. I think there are many good lessons that we have to relearn,
Hmm.
meaning that I at least did not learn them well the first time.
Right.
And the idea of really fully respecting my team um, to the point of where it doesn't really even enter my mind to disagree with them. The question I want to ask when it doesn't feel right to me is are questions that tell me how you're thinking about this problem. What is it you're considering to reach that conclusion?
Hmm.
And I'm just curious. I've developed a deep curiosity about how they're viewing things because their answer is probably right or better than mine. It just experience tells me it is.
Right, of course.
And I'm trying to get them in the explaining it to me to be able to explain it to their peers. Because if they're the head of, let's say, sales, and they're saying something that isn't intuitive to me, it's quite possible it's not intuitive to the other people around the table. And
Hmm.
if they can articulate it to me and say, hey, I've been out in front of this many people, here's what's happening, here's the competition, here's what we need to do, and here's why. I go, wow, I didn't know that. If they can take that and share it with the rest of the team, then we all up our game. So
Yeah,
it's just such an important thing to have a deep and sincere level of respect for the members of your team that you always show them correspondingly respectful and deep curiosity.
sounds good. Yes, I understand. Who showed you what not to do?
I think that one of my uh, faults is being too much of a perfectionist.
Sure.
And the way a lot of perfectionists deal with that is they release perfectionism in certain areas. Um, the their house is tidy because they like it that way, but their office is a mess. That's me.
Hmm.
I have to release my perfectionism in my office because I can't get anything done if I'm always trying to make it right.
Of course.
I think that the vivid example is when I was young, I worked for somebody who said, "Hey, we need to get the proposal out. We need to get this, that, and the other nailed down. I need you to, put pencil to paper." And you can tell it was a while ago by that expression. And just lay it out here. And I go, "Oh, that'll take me into the month or whatever." And this person's name was Jack, and Jack would say, "No, no, we don't have to the end of the month. We have to get this done the next couple of days." I'd be like, "You can't do it. I need to research it." And he would say, "No, you know enough compared with where we're at. We're doing, if it was a software release, it'd be a .5. You know enough now. And if you can't allocate the time, I understand. I totally empathize with it. But if you can't put it on my desk tomorrow morning, then I'll help you. I'll make my conference room available to you with a little jar full of pencils and a lot of tablets. And I guarantee you'll crank it out in under 2 hours." And you know what? The first time I just thought he doesn't know what he's doing, and I let it go. And he said, "No problem. I got it. Here's the conference room. There's the table. Here's the chair. Here's the pencils. I'll see you in 2 hours." And I did it.
Hmm.
And it wasn't beautiful. And I didn't like it because I could have done better,
Hmm.
but it was exactly what we needed at that point in time. And learning that lesson is it's the best solution that wins, not the perfect solution, and certainly not the solution that never enters the game.
Yeah, I like that sort of idea that you've brought along in this episode of putting out the point five, make an attempt because if you don't make an attempt, you're never going to get anywhere.
Yep.
Um, what did your father teach you about leadership or responsibility?
Chuckling. My father uh, grew up in a family. His dad was a mining engineer. He hopped around the U.S. and lived in exciting places like El Paso and Cokedale.
Hmm.
And he was then a Navy pilot at the end of World War II. So he did a lot of things. Um, he used to say things that really stick in my mind. One was when I was be facing a very difficult solution. I'm sorry, difficult situation. He would say, Howard, it's really simple. Just do what's fair.
Hmm.
And it would sink into me. He said it to me more than once. I would go, okay, I knew you were going to say that. But it's hard to determine what's fair here. And he goes, yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the scope of
So,
that question is interesting.
yeah, what's the scope of the question? Who are the constituents? Who does it matter for? What is it you're really trying to achieve? But it's a way, which I think is values. And in a word, well, it's values that made me think about what is it I really want to put forward here. And I do want it to be perceived as fair. I want it to be something that people can trust in, that I don't overstate what it is, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And that just taught me a lot. In fact, in a word, what my father taught me was values. A very highly principled individual who lived his life by, he lived and practiced a life of values.
What does do what's fair look like in the business world? Because I think it's very often hard to justify fair when there's so many other things to worry about in a company.
Well, it depends on, the problem, and I don't know that the value of fairness applies to every problem, but let's
Mhm.
talk about how we treat our employees. I mean, fair means in accordance with whatever mission you're establishing. I mean, let's face it, if the purpose of the company is to lay down highways, that's going to be a, sweaty, hard-working job.
Right.
But you can still provide them fair pay, and you can provide them the breaks they need. You can give them the right equipment. You can expect them then to perform at a certain level. You can hire people that at the point you're hiring them, you say, hey, look, is this, you sort of want to shovel dirt when people are looking, and what kind of laying kind of road are you looking for, or do you want to have the best equipment and lay down the most miles of road there is? We're the second kind of company. Just being honest with them.
Right.
Fairness
Hmm.
involves honesty as to what it is this company is doing, and so I think it really applies to people at the moment you hire them. It applies as you determine what their work uh, process is going to consist of, how you pay them, how you reward them. And people are a huge component of business. So I think that's where it primarily applies. Although if you broaden fairness into honesty and into building trust, then it applies across the whole business. You don't have a business unless your customers trust you, your suppliers. In this day and age of very high-tech partners, you cannot develop three sources for every chip you buy. You're going to have
Right.
one, and you better have a trusting relationship, a trusted relationship with that company. So simple values matter.
Hmm. What lesson have you, as a mentor, passed down most often to others?
I think that I usually mentor people who are going through a step function in their leadership challenges as
Hmm.
they progress.
Sure.
And accordingly, I think as a leader, so they revolve around leadership. And every difficult decision you make as a leader, I believe should be grounded in one or more of your values, the strategy that the team has agreed on. And it should be grounded then in your uh, market, what the external reality you're dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and if you can't, when you're making that decision, if the decision is about something hard, like a layoff, how does that affect those things? Your values, is that something you can live with? How are you going to articulate that? How does it affect your ability to execute your strategy? How does it affect what you promised or what you said you would do to deliver to your customers? Um, I think those are the things that really matter, and those are the tough decisions that you need to make. And that's what I come back to with those people I mentor all the time. And usually the things they're hung up on, they know what they are.
Right.
Almost every one of them, when they sit down, will say, here are the three things that I need to change in the next 12 months. And then they'll let things get in the way of them. So the intellectual honesty and as you pointed out, sticking to your strategies and seeing them all the way through. You can't get sidetracked. And I guess I'm giving you more than one now, I'm afraid.
It's all
But
right.
I
No, that's
tell
great.
people there are like five or six number one things that a good leader must do.
Right.
So, it's a bit of a problem getting it down to one. But
Yeah.
yeah,
25/8.
yeah, you got it.
25/8. Um, a lot of this podcast, One Idea Way, is built around the idea that one idea can change the way you see everything in life. I'm curious what those ideas were from a mentor for you.
I think they're the ones we just covered, frankly. I think
Mhm.
that it's easy to get caught up in a complex company with all of the urgent things. This has to get done. I want to clear my email box by the end of the day, or whatever it is you're caught up in doing. Um, but if you're at a senior level of leadership, a question I get asked a lot at a senior level: how much of my time should I be using managing the teams who work for me, leading them too, leading and managing?
Right, of course.
And how much of my time should I be doing other things? And I tell them, look, if your team is performing well and you got it to where it needs to be, you should spend less than half your time on your declared job function. Meaning, if you're the head of engineering, you spend less than half your time worrying about getting the product out the door. The other half has to be working horizontally with all the other functions that make the company work. And even if you're the CEO, uh, Chambers, the head of Cisco, said he spent half his time with customers. So that means he got the running of the company down to a lot less than half.
Right.
He could spend time with the board and the teams he had to work with, etc. So I think the concept of getting your eyes up at the horizon if you're a leader, pointing your eyes at that North Star, and leading again with values, strategic purpose, and engaged with the market and customers.
hmm If you had to give people one idea from your own life and career, what would it be?
Don't be afraid to make mistakes, but learn from them.
hmm When did you learn that?
If you're asking when did I start making mistakes, that would be a continuous of day zero through today. Hence you do have to relearn certain key
Yeah.
things. Was there a particular point in time when I learned that? Um, I was interviewing as I left college, and at college, it's certainly a lot different than high school. You're not
Right.
just being trained in some one thing, but even then, the problems have answers. And I hadn't quite, and I'd begun to learn that the really interesting problems don't have the answers. And I was interviewing with a well-known company, and I said, "Why the heck would you want to hire me? I'm just getting out of college." And they said, "Because you don't know what can't be done." And it was actually the kind of words of Richard Feynman. I want to teach
Right.
freshmen physics because they don't have any preconceived notions of how physics should work. And in there was the secret of you're not afraid to fail. You're going to jump in with your ideas, you're going to explore them, and hopefully you'll learn to fast fail and then move on to another idea, another idea, another idea. And so I think that's probably the biggest place I learned that failure is good if you move quick and learn.
Right. I think it's really easy to listen to these ideas and these frameworks and ways of thinking about things and just say to yourself like, oh, that doesn't apply to me, or like I can't fail because if I fail, it's a big deal. Did you believe this idea of like failure is growth right away? Or is that something that life had to prove to you to some extent?
Well, you got to learn that quick because if you don't learn it quick, you're either not going to take risks and that'll just paralyze you,
Right.
or you'll take a risk and then when it doesn't come out, you'll destroy yourself, because, so you got to learn that lesson quick. And, like I say, I learned some of it in college that there were questions to which there are no answers. Oh, that's exciting. That means that failing is good. It means like the best minds in the world are failing at that. And
Right.
they're noted to be the best minds.
hmm
So you can't be afraid of failure. I think the fear maybe does translate. Can I take a new approach? Am I doing something fresh? Can I do enough research into what's happened that I can take a different perspective? But that isn't a fear of failure. That's a move forward quick and try again.
hmm Yeah. How without waiting for some big decision or some catalyst like college to make a mistake, how could someone actually practice the idea of failure is growth this week?
Well, I can think of a few. I mean, if you're into any kind of sport, um, try it a new way. If you're playing tennis and you have a great serve, you have a power serve, dial back on the power. Work on placement. Work on placement only. Work on the right level of spin. If you're I can think back when I did a lot of math, there were certain problems that I could solve my way, but I came across people who solved them quicker. And so I thought, oh, let me try that. I wasn't wrong. I mean, I hadn't failed in some abject way of, I mean,
Right. Mhm.
but I realized that my way wasn't the best way, because there were ways that were quicker, more accurate. But today, back to your today, yeah, you can do it in sports. You can do it if you're great in, well, go back to math, solve the problem a different way, challenge yourself. Doing it, like I said, when you solve something, you only learn one way.
Mhm.
Um, by the way, become a TA or become an instructor for younger kids because they'll ask you questions that you never asked yourself. And they'll make you think, if you're tutoring in math, of different ways to solve the problem. You can't just show them your way. You have to show them the way that connects for them, and that will challenge your mathematical mind. It'll cause you to fail and grow in ways that your mind never did on its own.
Mhm. That's great. That feels like a really good place to end. Thank you for doing this. What I really like about this conversation specifically is that it kind of shows that leadership in and of itself isn't just about titles or being in charge. That's just like management, as you said. It's about having judgment, responsibility, patience, honesty, your three scoped phrase earlier about being respectful of the past, honest about the present, optimistic about the future. It's about having all of those things and considering everything. For everyone listening, I think the idea that I would take away from this episode is that real leadership isn't just about making the right decision that's correct to you. It's about helping people understand the problem, understand the solution, their solution, your solution, and making those all one collaborative thing and moving forward together. Um, yeah. Thank you for listening to One Idea Away.
Thank you, Hayden.